Hi, this is Langley Respess with UBS Financial Services. Welcome to my podcast, Life, Work, and Money. In my nearly 30 years of helping investors with investment management and personal financial planning, I have met some very interesting people. On this podcast, I interview creative, energetic, and influential people to see what makes them tick and to understand the secrets of their success. Hi, this is Langley Respess, and I would like to welcome my guest Rick Jones to our show today. Rick is the founder, head captain, and creative director of Fishbait Solutions, a sports entertainment and lifestyle sponsorship and event marketing consultancy based in South Carolina. Rick, thank you for agreeing to be on my podcast, Life, Work, and Money. How are you?
I'm terrific, Langley. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're so glad you're here with us today. How are things on Wadmalaw Island, South Carolina?
Well, they're great. You know, I'm a fifth generation Atlanta boy, but I have a pickup truck with a bumper sticker on it that says I'm not from Charleston, but I got here as fast as I could.
Right, exactly.
So it's always a great day in the low country.
Yeah, changes in latitudes and changes in attitudes, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Well, one of the first things I noticed, Rick, when I met you years ago was your title, head captain. I think that's fascinating and a great title for yourself. How did you come up with the title head captain?
Well, I'd like to claim it, but it was really my wife's idea. You know, when we formed Fishbait back in 2003, I told her I thought I would be the managing director, and she laughed and said, "Honey, you don't even manage the house. You need a better title." And she said, "You need to be the captain." Right. And it kind of stuck. And for a few years, all of our staff, their titles were crew. Right. And then she came to me and said, "You know, that's really fun, but it doesn't really work in the real world. I need to be an account director." Right. So everybody became, real titles, but I kept the title, the captain.
Well, I saw the photo of you reeling in some big fish down there on your boat, so it looks like you really are the head captain.
Yeah, I like to fish, and I like to be on the water, and I like the whole idea of I've always said the speed of the ship is determined by the speed of the captain.
Right.
And I like being the captain.
I'm going to have to remember that phrase. I like that. So in looking at the way you describe the organization, you're a sports, entertainment, and lifestyle sponsorship and event marketing consultancy. And that is, an interesting way to position your business, Fishbait, in the marketplace. And so I'm curious, Rick, what would you say is sort of in your estimation the highest and best use of a marketing agency when a new client comes to use Fishbait?
I like to describe us as a guide, and I think the fishing analogy is kind of interesting from the stand. When you come, a lot of times you'll go to the beach and you'll say, "Hey, I'm going to take my kids fishing," and you'll get a guide. You'll get a charter captain that will take you out there. Our job is to connect brands with consumers. Mm-hmm. And to help companies understand the most impactful ways to do that. And that's essentially what a marketing agency does. Marketing is about creating consumer demand for goods and services. Sales is really pretty easy. It's just fulfilling demand. Mm-hmm. But if there's no demand, it's awfully hard to sell anything.
Well, that's interesting, connecting brands to consumers. And we think about some of the most famous brands in the world, and several are located here in Atlanta with UPS and Coca-Cola and big organizations like that, Delta, Home Depot, really terrific brands that we all know really, really well. It's interesting to me, Rick, that we're operating now in the world of the coronavirus, COVID, and we don't talk about doing virtual meetings anymore. We just say Zoom. And so Zoom has ascended to the highest heights, much like Kleenex has, or a Coca-Cola. When I was growing up as a kid, you said, "Let me get a Coke," but what you really meant was practically any soft drink. So it's interesting how some brands reach the pinnacle, and some maybe without even trying, or at least not appearing to try.
Yeah, you say, I need a Band-Aid. Well, that's a brand name. What you needed is an adhesive bandage, but you remember that particular brand of an adhesive bandage. And Zoom has really done a great job of capturing so much market share. And I have to be honest, we're on Zoom calls pretty much all day these days, but there's some other operating systems that are out there, and they are, in my opinion, more difficult to navigate. Zoom not only seems to work, but it seems to be easier to utilize. And I think that's why they've kind of captured the imagination, and a virtual meeting now is called a Zoom.
Right. Make it easy for the end user. And I've noticed that too. I'm not really that great of a technologist, but even I can use Zoom, which is pretty neat. So connecting brands with consumers, in your estimation, Rick, who are some of the great organizations out there, the great brand companies who've done the best job of connecting their brands with their consumers?
Well, I think there's some obvious ones. Nike years ago coined the phrase, just do it. Mm-hmm. And it really appealed to the athlete in all of us, whether that's someone that's going to actually compete in a team sport or a road race or just walk. The ability to connect that brand to your own personal performance, I think, is a really interesting concept. We have a colleague of ours here at Fishbait who early in his career, he worked at an ad agency called Ammirati and Puris. And that agency at the time had the BMW account, and they wrote, which I think is one of the greatest taglines ever, they coined BMW as the ultimate driving machine. Mm-hmm. And that tagline has stayed. And so they've connected with a consumer that wants to drive a high performance automobile where they, the driver, actually participate in part of the experience of that. And so those are two great, ways of connecting brands to consumers. I think where brands sometimes run into trouble is trying to be all things to all people. Early in my career, I worked in sponsorship for Sears. Mm-hmm. And you remember Sears was such an iconic institution, especially for people of my age.
Sure.
That one time they had a thing called the Wish Book.
That's how we ordered all of our clothes living on the farm. We got all of our clothes out of the Wish Book.
Yeah. And so, but Sears, they lost their way once we started kind of dividing audiences. Sears wanted to be all things to all people. And unfortunately, they became either no things to all people or all things to no people. And those are both bad. Right. And part of it is you can't serve everybody. Right. There are very few ubiquitous products that one size fits all. And so I think the success that brands have is really understanding who you're trying to appeal to. Who is your primary consumer target, and then talk to that target in unique ways. I just think trying to be all things to all people today is clearly a formula for failure.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. And, the great brands evoke a feeling of nostalgia, and even a feeling of nostalgia for something you never were or never had. And so, the F-150, for example. I mean, what guy doesn't want to own an F-150 four-wheel drive? I mean, it just puts you in a place of being that guy, going to faraway places and rugged places. Or, Orvis, if you're a fisherman, with the gear that they have. You may not be a great fisherman, but you're going to have their gear, and you believe it helps make you a better fisherman. And so, the whole notion of creating a brand that people respond to emotionally is what it's all about, I'm sure, and that's what you guys are trying to do or help with. I noticed that you at Fishbait, your one of your goals is to help turn customers into fans, and help do that through their tribes by enhancing their lifestyles. And in your materials, you capitalized the word fans, tribes, and lifestyles. And I thought that says a lot about what you're trying to accomplish. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I'm going to use an example. You're a Tar Heel.
Yep.
And so you are a fan of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, mm-hmm. teams. And when you are a fan of the Tar Heels, there's a commonality among all those fans. It's like it breaks all the barriers down. We don't know what your political affiliation is. We don't know if you're a man or a woman. We don't know about your sexual preferences. We don't know about your income. We don't know about your background. We just know go Heels.
Right.
And so therefore you become a member of that tribe.
Right.
And that passion for North Carolina is so strong. Well, brands want to reach affinity groups,
right,
tribes. And I had a former boss named Chuck Jarvie that had the best definition of an affinity group or a tribe. He said it's a group of people that will suspend rational behavior in pursuit of their passions. Wow. That's like a college football or a college basketball fan. And what we tell brands is this, though. You can't just show up and say, oh, I'm a member of the tribe, too. You have to prove it.
Right.
And the brand, the best way to prove it to the tribe is to bring value to the way they consume, in your case, North Carolina basketball. Mm-hmm. What can I do that makes that experience better for you in a memorable way? At the end of the day, the only reason that a brand will sponsor anything is for the children.
Right.
It's for the offspring. It's for the tribe.
Right.
And we try to make sure that brands understand that being a member of a tribe really is a lifestyle. I mean, you'll wear the badge, you'll wear Carolina blue, you'll maybe during March Madness, you'll theme what you're eating at home around when the Heels play. You're all a part of this, and so it is a lifestyle. And for us, it's a lifestyle in things like college sports or country music or hunting and fishing or food festivals or patriotic historical venues. All of these are touch points that attract tribes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right, because we build our lifestyles around the things we believe in and love, and we want to be around other fans like us who share those common feelings. I see. That's
exactly.
Yeah.
And the greatest example of that, Langley, is licensed merchandise. Mm-hmm. I mean, you will wear Carolina colors, Carolina marks, Carolina logos to say, I'm part of the tribe.
Right, sure. My oldest baseball cap, which I should throw away, is a UNC championship, basketball championship hat, I think from 2016.
Oh, I mean, you won't get rid of it. It's too much part of you.
Right. Now, I remember you telling me once that when you're doing your work for your clients, you help your clients bait the hook to suit the fish, not the fisherman. And I love that phrase. How do you do that?
Well, one of the things I tell people as a fisherman is the one thing I've learned about fish is they don't care about fishermen.
Right.
Fish care about fish. They care about cover and food and mating and all the things that fish do. And that's the same thing with the customers. Customers are brands. And so you got to think like the fish. It's not about your needs. It's about the needs of your customers. For us as an agency, it's about the needs of the brand. But for the brand, it's about the needs of their customers and consumers. And so I think you have to, we call it, tying custom tie. You can't use the same bait for different audiences. You have to have specific bait in order to reach that particular consumer segment that you're trying to do.
I'm sure that our listeners would really love it if you could describe how you have designed a campaign and, perhaps your favorite campaign you've worked on or a campaign from the world of country music or college football. If you could perhaps give us some neat examples, I think that would be a lot of fun.
Well, I'll give you one, again, from the world of college basketball. One of our clients is Warner Ladder. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think everybody looks for in any sponsorship is how to be authentic. How do you be a part of the event in a way that's meaningful, not only for your brand and for the event, but for the fan base? Well, our client, Warner Ladder, is the ladder of cutting down the nets in March Madness.
Right.
They started cutting down the nets in 1941. And it was actually a guy named Everett Case, who was a basketball coach in the state of Indiana. And I think he did it first. Well, later he came to NC State, and he was the first one, I think, to cut down the nets in the ACC tournament. If you remember anything about the history of the ACC, those schools were predominantly in the old Southern Conference back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And the Southern Conference was the very first conference to have a basketball tournament. So when they formed the Atlantic Coast Conference in 1953, part of the DNA was to have a postseason conference basketball tournament, the famous ACC tournament. And Everett Case's NC State team cut down the nets. Well, then it became popular in the NCAA, in the championships, to climb a ladder and cut down the nets. But it was, 11 years ago that our client Warner branded that ladder and created a branded ladder, and they built it in a way that you can't buy that ladder because it's a 9-foot ladder. They don't sell 9-foot ladders, but that's easier for the coach and the players to climb up it. It is built for big feet because we obviously have players with large feet. Right. And it's got a podium on it. It's got a place that you can put the scissors so that you can cut your part of the net and put the scissors back in place, because we've seen coaches, in fact, Roy Williams cut himself one year cutting down the nets with ladder, with the scissors on the ladder. And so, what we love about it is, building a championship team, the ladder is a metaphor. You have to start at the ground and climb the ladder every day to the national championship. And the beauty of March Madness and the NCAA tournament is that's the last thing that happens. You won the national championship and you climb the ladder and cut down the nets. And what a great way to promote a ladder. And so, you can buy our ladder at Lowe's and Home Depot or at pro retailers and other places. And in this case, you can buy the same type of ladder, not the same ladder, the same type of ladder that you see in cutting down the net. So that's one example. Our new CEO and our mutual friend, Rob Temple, created the first game day sponsorship by the Home Depot. It's a great story where game day had been previously sponsored by the Discover Card, and they had not taken that show on the road. It was a studio show that occasionally would go to big games. And ultimately, Rob was able to re-engineer the partnership where game day was built by the Home Depot literally built by the Home Depot. Home Depot was part of building the desk. They brought jumbotrons for the fans to look at. They brought a football field to do, interstitials and football clinics on the field. And they bought a bus that they wrapped that the talent could hang out in and watch games and stuff. So, I think it's in its 22nd year now, which is pretty phenomenal for a sponsorship to last that long.
You're working with some really tremendous marquee level organizations. When I look through your client lineup, the Country Music Association, ESPN, the College Football Hall of Fame, and these are marquee clients for any organization. And I'm sure that they come with a set of very high expectations. How do you, from a business standpoint, manage to keep so many plates spinning to be able to keep your many clients happy with their many different kinds of requests?
Well, number one, all of these brands attract wonderful tribes, large numbers, and very passionate people. Fans of country music are very passionate about the genre of music and about the artists that they love. I think you just have to never rest on your laurels.
Right.
Running an agency, the best training I ever had, I started my career as a coach. And, the first thing you realize as a coach is you can't play. You better get players. Right. And I've been really blessed over the years to have had so many wonderful people that have worked with us that bring great value to our clients. But secondly, as a coach, last night's game doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
Right.
The most important game is the next game. And you've got to be able to put success in the rearview mirror. And you'll watch teams during the year that don't do that, and then they get beat. They get upset. They've read their clippings about how wonderful they are. Well, the other team gives scholarships too, and they got tired of reading about how wonderful you are, and they've come in here and knocked you off. And I think as an agency, you've got to consistently be looking ahead in ways to add value to your clients. I like to say it's not how high you go, but how far you can go. Mm-hmm. You could be on top of the perch looking down on everybody, but you're measuring the wrong thing. Bob Knight, the great Bob Knight, who was a tremendous basketball coach at Indiana University and Texas Tech, he had the best definition of success I ever heard. He said, success is performing to the limits of your potential. Mm-hmm. I love that. Mm-hmm. Limits of your potential. Don't measure yourself against anybody else, and don't even measure yourself against your previous success. Measure your success by how good you can be. What is the level of the performance that you can ascribe to? And I like that.
Yeah, well, I think that's right. And, you've got to get up every day and come to work and do your very best. And that's what your clients expect of you. And if your clients see you doing that every single day, then they'll come to trust you and they'll rely on you more and more. And you can go deeper into that relationship and fans out of your clients, which is really where you want to be.
Well, I'm going to link it back to your business. I think trust is the most important part of that business relationship. But part of trust is the ability to challenge. Mm-hmm. My philosophy in marketing is I need to bring them insights they have not thought about. I need to bring them fresh thinking and new thinking. And I need to bring them ideas that maybe make them a little bit uncomfortable. Right. Because, big ideas make you gulp a little bit. It's like, oh, that's a big, it makes you firm. But the big ideas is what drives value, I think. And the ability for clients to trust the agency to bring them big ideas that are well thought out. And you've looked at the risk and rewards, but you're still trying to push the envelope. I think that's important.
I'm thinking about how much work you've done in some of the more well-known segments that you've traditionally worked in, college sports, country music, but you also do work in outdoor sports like hunting and fishing, as well as culinary events and historic patriotic venues. I'd be really curious, Rick, if you could tell us more about the opportunities you've seen in culinary events and patriotic venues. That sounds fascinating.
Well, everything kind of starts with a fan. Mm-hmm. I like to consider myself a fan anthropologist that really looks at, what brings value to the fan and how do we live our lives holistically. Let's take, college football for a minute. Coming to a game, I'm probably listening to music on my way to the game. I'm probably on the way to the game before the pregame radio show comes on. So I've got a soundtrack that I like to listen, and a lot of college football fans are big country music fans. So there's a linkage there. Mm-hmm. Then I'm going to tailgate, and we've spent time and money deciding what we're going to prepare and eat on that particular game day. So the intersection of food, I think, is part of that. But when we started looking at kind of the profile of the fan base, we saw some commonalities. Now, one of the things that we try to be here at Fishbait is very inclusive. Mm-hmm. Let's face it, we're in a divided country in a lot of ways right now. I don't need to create any more divisiveness. Right. I want to unite people. I want people to share common passions and what we call common joys and how to bring joy. But there's some there's some kind of characteristics of the fan that we reach. Family is very important to them. Flag, patriotism tends to be very important to them. Faith is important to them. And clearly fun is part of that. So, so sports, music, hunting, fishing, food, and then this, idea of historic patriotic ventures, we call that division our American heritage. Mm-hmm. That's celebrating our heritage and our American values of patriotism and liberty, and justice for all, and working to form a more perfect union and those types of things. And so I think they're about uniting people. And we're looking to bring things that unite people under common passions.
Mm-hmm. Well, God knows this country could really use to be united right about now, and I think nothing brings people together like food, for example. And if you all are able to support culinary events and do work in that area, I think you can really hit a home run there, because we all like food and we all like to eat.
Well, Ray Charles, when he died, gave some money to Dillard University in New Orleans, a historically black college, not for their music department, but for their culinary school. And someone said, well, why did you do that? He said, nothing brings people together than music and food.
Right.
I would add sport to that. You put sport, food, and music together, that's a pretty good day.
Yeah, well, it really is. As the culinary event and patriotic venues piece of the business, something that's a driver of growth for Fishbait?
Yeah, I think. I mean, the American Heritage Division is brand new for us. We were hired by the American Battlefield Trust out of Washington, D.C. to develop a corporate sponsorship program around the Liberty Trail. Yeah, people don't know this. The American Revolution was won in the South. We won the Revolution in the South. Francis Marion, Thomas Sumter, Pickens. We kept Cornwallis at bay and kept him from being able to unite back with the troops in the North to defeat Washington. And we just wore them out here. We fought more battles in South Carolina than all the other colonies combined. We're building out a really integrated program that involves, battlefields and land that we're buying and preserving and developing, with storytelling and media and special events and merchandise that will all lead up to a culminating event in 2026 when we celebrate the 250th anniversary of America. So we're very excited about what we're doing there. And we've been fortunate that recently they've given us a couple of other assignments. One called the Revolutionary War Experience that will be in a partnership with the Daughters of American Revolution. And the other one is connected to the Medal of Honor.
Oh, wow.
And being able to stitch together the stories and the places where these brave men and women received the Presidential Medal of Honor.
Wow. Well, that sounds wonderful. Well, let me switch gears on you for just a second here, Rick. So, marketing is business. How would your clients define success when using your company, Fishbait Solutions? And how are you able to quantify in dollars and cents how successful a program is?
Well, I think it starts with the articulation of what does the finish line look like. Mm-hmm. If you don't know where you want to take your brand, believe me, I can't take you there. I got to know what you're trying to do. Are you trying to grow market share? Are you trying to open a new geography? Are you opening a new SKU? Are you trying to reach a different audience segment? Are you trying to please, Walmart or Amazon? You're going to clearly identify what success looks like. And then we're going to build a plan to get you to that finish line. And throughout that planning journey, we're going to have measurements. Mm-hmm. We're going to know what we spent, what we did, and what results came from that. Everything you do has to have a return. Mm-hmm. And so, we're pretty dogmatic about getting our property clients and our corporate clients to really identify success and to quantify success. And then we'll begin to build that through that. You know, Langley, human beings, and I say this about businesses, you know, sometimes people will tell me, you know, Rick, you don't understand, we're a B2B business. And I'll say, well, with no disrespect, I've never seen a business buy anything. Right. A human being buys it on behalf of a business, but it's humans. And humans only change behavior for two reasons: pleasure and pain. And in business, it's usually about 3-to-1 pain. Right. And so what we try to do is identify the problem. What's the problem you're trying to solve? You know, where is there a problem? You know, Chick-fil-A used ESPN and college football extremely well to grow their breakfast business. If you've been to a Chick-fil-A, and I'm on record today as saying Chick-fil-A should give all of the COVID-19 vaccines because they know how to operate. You know,
they really have a process, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And in fact, there was a story this week in Charleston about a Chick-fil-A operator that has actually helped them with that. But Chick-fil-A, you know, lunchtime is tough at Chick-fil-A. They're at capacity. Well, they didn't have much of a breakfast business when they started. Remember, they started in shopping malls where they had, you know, units in the food courts. And obviously the shopping mall wasn't open until 10 o'clock. So there was no need for breakfast. Right. Then they started building freestanding units. In fact, the first one was in Atlanta at the corner of North Druid Hills and Briarcliff Road. And then they realized, look, we could have a breakfast business and encourage people because we've got the kitchen, we've got capacity, we have all the things. And ESPN drove largely males who tended to utilize drive-through for breakfast more than females. Why? We're too lazy to cook. And so on the way to the office, we'll just go by and get a chicken biscuit and a cup of coffee. And it really drove volume for them. And so that was a specific need, a problem that they had. And so anytime you're working with a brand, I want to find where's the pain. If I can find the pain, then maybe I can diagnose the pain and find a solution for the pain. And then we can measure how we solve that problem.
So I was looking at your bio, Rick, and, you know, you've had really, you had a very deep marketing and PR background before you ever started your first company called the Strategic Group in 1986. You were with Georgia Tech and Conan Wolfe. How did those experiences prepare you to become an entrepreneur?
You know, Langley, the older I get, the more I really believe that maybe entrepreneurs are born that way. Mm-hmm. It's just in the way God made us in our DNA. I grew up always being an entrepreneur. At age 9, I started climbing trees at Christmas and picking mistletoe. And from the age of 9 until I graduated from college, I sold mistletoe every Christmas. And one of the beauties of it was free. Right. I didn't have to pay for my product. I just climbed up in trees in woods and bundled it and sold it. I had a paper route at age 10 and went right up through high school. For my 11th birthday, my daddy gave me my own lawnmower because I was wearing his out, cutting all the widows' lawns in my neighborhood. I just knew I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Years ago, Jerry Lewis had the telethon for muscular dystrophy. And as a kid, you could order what was called the carnival kit. You could put on a carnival in your neighborhood and raise money for Jerry's kids. Wow. And I remember doing that. And I remember when I opened my first agency in 1987, my aunt sent me a note that said, I see little Ricky finally has his carnival. She knew I was always an entrepreneur. But Georgia Tech and Conan Wolf impacted me in so many ways because I met two amazing men that made such an impact on my life. I worked for Dr. Homer Rice at Georgia Tech. And I learned more about leadership and organization from that man. I still have on my desk the notebook I had at Georgia Tech called Leadership Through Athletics that Dr. Rice had given to me that I just wore out with notes. He had such an impact on my life. He was he was a former football coach. He coached in the National Football League. He coached in college. He was an AD at North Carolina at one point and was an AD at Georgia Tech. And I learned so much from him. And so then I go to work for the craziest man on the planet, a guy named Bob Cohn at Conan Wolf, who to this day is the most creative human being I've ever known. And, one of the great stories is when I left Conan Wolf, he always called me coach because I'd been a coach before. He'd say, Coach, how you doing?
Right.
And I remember going to him and saying, Bob, I'm going to leave. And he was like, Coach, you're doing such great work here. Why are you going to leave? And I looked at him and said, it's not that I don't want to work for Bob Cohn. I want to be Bob Cohn.
Right.
And he loved that. And he stuck his hand out and said, I will help you. And every little small property, once I started my first firm that was too small for Conan Wolf, he would tell them to hire me.
Wow. That's great.
And so I remembered that, and I have tried to live my life with anybody that worked for me that had a chance to do something different or better. I've always wished them well. I've always told them, let me know how I can help you. And I've always meant it because that's what Bob Cohn did for me.
Well, that's great. I mean, without our mentors and the people that we can look up to, how would we have ever gotten to be where we are now when we have to help others on the way up as well? So, Rick, not only are you an entrepreneur, you are also an author. And your book, written in 2015, entitled Analog Advice in a Digital World, was terrific. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what you wanted to accomplish with that book, and also how you came up with such an interesting title?
Well, I'll tell you how I came up with the title. I am a yellow pad guy. Mm-hmm. I go through literally hundreds, if not thousands, of yellow pads a year. I still like the ability to write things down on paper and not type them. I just like the feeling of the pen in my hand. It connects to my brain differently. But what happens is when you have, 30 yellow pads sitting on your desk, is it's kind of unwieldy to figure out what should I be doing with them. And so every so often I'll do what I call cull the herd. I'll sit down with, 30 yellow pads and I will consolidate them into one yellow pad.
Right.
And I was on a plane from Los Angeles to Atlanta, and I was doing about 20 of those pads. And, the flight attendant will walk by and I'd hand her the paper, that I was discarding. And there was a guy across the aisle from me that never said a word to me the entire flight. And when I got off the plane, at Hartsville in Atlanta, I went to the bathroom and all this, and I got on the escalator to change concourses. And the guy that had sat across from me on the plane was on the escalator across from me. They move at the same time too. And he looked over at me and he said, dude, I have called everybody I know and told them I have met Analog Man.
That's funny.
And so I am kind of Analog Man. I still like cooking cornbread in an iron skillet. I'm a little old fashioned. Right. Well, my kids had bugged me for years about all what I call coachisms, they call dadisms. Right. Just words of advice for young people. That work for really any generation. It's just kind of common sense stuff. But I like stories and I like sayings. And so I put down 52 sayings. And I told, young people, look, it's it's just one chapter a week, and or it's one airline flight, or it's 52 trips to the bathroom. I mean, Either way, they're very short chapters that are just little sayings and what they mean in ways to try to motivate people and teach them little life's lessons. And so analog advice in a digital world is just kind of common practices, words of wisdom from this baby boomer to younger people.
Right. Well, that's great. I enjoyed the book very much. I want to ask you this. We're going to be wrapping up here in a second, Rick, and you've been so successful in your own career, and you've brought people along with you, and a lot of our listeners are entrepreneurs or would like to be entrepreneurs. I wonder if you'd mind giving our listeners just a couple of tips that you've learned along the way that will help them as they go down the path as well.
Well, I'll give you one for the business. I think they're riches and niches. Mm-hmm. I think trying to be all things to all people, you'll fail. I like to take, I'd rather be an inch wide and a mile deep than a mile wide and an inch deep. Mm-hmm. And so I think find the unique niche for your business is a great roadmap for success. Every year, we all write down New Year's resolutions, and mine this year was consistency. I wanted to be less on a seesaw and just more consistent in everything that I'm doing. I think consistency is really important for entrepreneurs and business owners. Your staff, the people that look up to you, they understand we live in a volatile world. They want to see a leader that can be kind of consistent, good times, bad times, all times. And I haven't been so good at that in the past. And so I wanted to be that. But I think the most important thing you can be as a human being and as a business owner is authentic. You can't be a phony. Don't try to be somebody else. God made you totally unique. Your fingerprints are unique to anybody else's in the world that have ever lived. You are unique, and take advantage of your uniqueness and be authentic to who you are.
Right. Exactly.
And so I think the last word of advice is look for people that think and act differently than you do. Look for a new spice to go with your base. And that's going to make you, I think, collectively, more successful. I really do believe life and business are team sports, and it takes all kinds to make that gumbo.
Yeah, well, that's great advice. Before I let you go, Rick, I'd like to ask you a couple of personal questions. So, favorite book, favorite movie, and favorite hobby. Can you tell us your favorite book? What have you read recently, or your all-time favorite?
Well, I'm a big Pat Conroy fan. I live down here in the Low Country. I had a chance to meet him before he died. My wife actually taught with his daughter, Megan. Prince of Tides is one of the great American books that I absolutely love. My favorite movie was The Right Stuff, the movie version of the Tom Wolfe story of the Mercury astronauts. Mm-hmm. I still love it. I still love Hoosiers too. I like to watch Hoosiers. I still like that. I've told everybody, when somebody asked me the other day about hiring Rob Temple, him coming to work with us, I said, I feel like Norman Dale that got Jimmy Chitwood. There's that great scene where he says, with Jimmy, all the pistons are firing. Right. With Rob Temple, we're scary good. And you know how that movie ended. And then my favorite hobby, I really have two. I love to travel. And as much as I travel for business, I love to travel for leisure. I have a long bucket list of places I want to go everywhere in the world. And Langley, I love to cook. I really love to cook. It came from my days. I was oldest of three boys. So my mama didn't have any girls, so she taught me to cook. Right. And then I went off to college and I roomed with a bunch of guys in an apartment. I figured out really early, if you cook, you don't have to clean. And I like that. They'd be scrubbing pots and I'd be, watching a ball game because I cooked.
Well, that's a great hobby and a very enjoyable one for your friends. Rick, I like your words of insight. Be authentic. Be who you are. And that is such great advice. And I try to tell my kids that as well. well. And also that, every bowl of gumbo is different. Find spices that pair up and work well with your base, who you are, and be able to work with people who have different ideas and see the world differently than you do, and you'll have a better outcome. Rick Jones, head captain at Fishbait Solutions. How can our listeners reach you if they'd like to get a hold of you and get your help or ask a question?
Probably the two easiest ways are our website is www.fishbaitsolutions.com, and you can find my contact information there. And I'm on LinkedIn, and I use LinkedIn a lot. And, you can just contact me on LinkedIn, and we'll figure out a way to get together.
Well, that's great. Well, Rick, thank you for being on our podcast, Life, Work, and Money. I'm glad to call you a friend, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, pal. Appreciate it, and God bless.
God bless. Thanks, Rick.